All right, so we are looking at errors that affect the trial balance. All right, these are one-sided errors. The errors which we were looking at previously, they were affecting two accounts. All right, so there was no need for the suspense account. Now, here, these errors which affect the trial balance, it's a one-sided error. All right, so if you make a wrong journal entry post, all right, you find when you tabulate your trial balance, it is not going to balance. Why? Because one account wasn't correct, the journal entry wasn't correctly entered. All right, so let me just illustrate the purpose of the suspense account, because the suspense account has got two purposes. All right, it's a temporal account. If you don't know where to post a journal entry, right, it's a temporal account. And if your trial balance doesn't balance, you can open up the suspense account, look for your errors, and then correct them. All right. So the first purpose of the suspense account, it's a it's a temporal account. If you don't know where to post the journal entry, okay, temporal account. Here's just an illustration. Let's say we buy equipment worth 5,000 kwacha. All right, 5,000 kwacha. Now we do not know how to do this journal entry. All right, we know that okay, we have to credit cash. All right, but we don't know what we have to debit. All right, so what can happen is this. In the meantime, you can credit cash. All right, since we bought equipment for 5,000, what you can do, right? You can credit the cash account 5,000. Remember, cash is an asset. A decrease in an asset, you credit. All right, so you credit cash 5,000. Now, since if you do not know what account to debit, this is where the suspense account will come in. All right, the suspense account, you debit it. Suspense account. All right, all right, you debit the suspense account 5,000. Then afterwards, okay, after you consult and you find out that, oh, I was supposed to debit the equipment account. I was supposed to debit the equipment account. Afterwards, what you can do is, after I find out that you have to debit the equipment account, the next journal entry is you have to close this suspense account and debit the equipment account, right? After you found out which account you have to debit, you open the equipment account. All right, you open the equipment account. Then you close the suspense account by crediting it. You credit the suspense account 5,000 and you debit the equipment account 5,000. All right. So that's the first illustration of the use of the suspense account. If you do not know where to put your journal entry, all right? Any questions? All right. So whenever you're dealing with questions in accounts, all right, and you find you do not know where to do the journal entry, or in real life, if you're an accountant, the journal entry and you're not sure where to post, that's where the suspense account will come in. It's going to be your temporary account until you find out where to post. And then when you find out where to post, then you can close the the suspense account, right? Then the second purpose of the suspense account, all right? Let's say, for example, we have a trial balance here. Let's say capital. Let's make a small trial balance here. Debit credit. Let's say capital. We have 50,000 here. Cash. 50,000. Receivables. 5,000. Right. Right. So let's say you have a small trial balance here. All right. Then you find when you tally it up on your credit side, it's 50,000. On this side, it is 45,000. All right. Find it. If you've done all your journal entries, then you come, you make your trial balance, then you find that okay, one side is 50,000, the other side is 45,000. Right. What you're going to do is first you get the difference. All right. 50 minus 45,000, it is 5,000. So you put the difference here, all right, on the debit side, because the debit side is less than the credit side, all right. We have to make sure that these two are equal, all right. So you say 50,000 minus 45,000, and you get 5,000. So this, your suspense account is going to temporarily balance your trial balance, okay. It's going to temporarily balance the trial balance until you find out what errors have been made. All right. Until you find out the errors that have been made. All right. Then you can correct the errors and you can adjust the trial balance. All right. So it's going to be a temporal account to balance the trial balance. Let's say maybe you are still not able to find the errors. What you can do is, if the suspense account has a balance on the debit side, all right, if it has a balance on the debit side, on your balance sheet, you treat it as a current asset, right? This is a situation where your trial balance hasn't balanced. You've opened the suspense account to temporarily balance the trial balance, all right? Then you haven't yet found the errors yet, so you can still take this suspense account into the balance sheet. All right, here the balance sheet. And then if suspense account has a debit balance here, all right, of 5,000, it will be treated as a current asset. All right. If our suspense account had a credit balance, you treat it as a current liability in the balance sheet, right? So on your balance sheet under current assets, you have your suspense account there, suspense. There. That's if your suspense account has a debit balance. All right. The suspense account has a credit balance. Right. On your balance sheet under current liabilities, right, you put your suspense account. All right. That's if you haven't yet found what errors are causing this balance sheet not to balance. Okay. So here, once we put that the temporal suspense account here, okay, your trial balances for a little while until you find your errors. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to look at an example. So remember, the errors we're looking at here, they're only one-sided errors, all right? These are the errors that affect the trial balance. Have you seen? As we could see here in this previous illustration here, the trial balance did not balance, so we had to open up a suspense account. All right, so these errors we're looking at today, they're the ones that affect the trial balance. All right, so we'll start. Let me just make this trial balance quickly here, and then we list the errors and right. So in this example here, we've already opened our suspense account, all right, and we found the errors. So we're going to make corrections to the errors. So here, this is going to be 550,000. And then what they tell us is the reason why the trial balance did not balance. Firstly, trade payables, trade payables was understated by 25,000. Land was overstated by 30,000. Overstated, overcast, understated, undercast, same thing. All right, then we see expenses. Expenses were overstated or overcast by. But it's us up to us to make the corrections. All right, make the corrections so that we can get rid of this suspense account and our trial balance can balance finally without needing that suspense account. All right. So we have to correct these errors. All right. So let me just get the table for the double entry rules so that we see what is happening here. Okay, so here are the double entry rules we have to follow. Right, so they've told us trade payables was overstated by 25,000. I mean, understated by 25,000. So what type of account is trade payables? Anybody? What type of account is trade payables? Remember, this is the control account here. Okay. After you've tabulated everyone who's owing you money, all right, you put it in your control account and it appears here on the trial balance. All right. So what type of account are our trade payables? Oh, and we also open the suspense account. All right. Also have to open the suspense account. So from the trial balance, we know that our suspense account is going to have a credit balance. All right. Credit balance. And if we are not able to spot these errors, all right, we would have treated this suspense account as a current liability on the balance sheet. All right. If we were not able to spot these errors. But since we spotted these errors, we have to correct them and we close the suspense account. All right. So trade payables is a liability account. All right. It's a liability account. Remember, liabilities an increase, a debit decreases the liabilities, and a credit increases the liabilities. All right. A debit decreases for liabilities and credit increases. So here our trade payables was understated and trade payables was understated. So what do we have to do? We have to increase the trade payables, right? We have to increase them. All right. So how do you increase a liability? You credit it, right? You credit it. So your journal entry will be like this, right? You're going to credit your trade payables, all right? And then the suspense account will facilitate the double entry. Okay, so trade payables, you credit them 25,000, right? And then you debit the suspense account. Because remember, these are one-sided errors, all right? So the suspense account is the one which is going to be helping you facilitate the what do you call this? The double entry. All right. So your suspense account, you debit 25,000. Are we okay with that? Any questions? Any questions?
Suspense account should be 75.
I never heard you, sir, Mr. Charles. Can you repeat that?
On the suspense account, it's not 75, not 25, suspense.
This 75 here is this 75. This one here is this one here. Now, since we've found our first error, we're correcting it, so we're going to debit the suspense account 25,000. So the suspense account is facilitating the double entry. If you remember in your assignments, and I think especially for control accounts, most of those were one-sided errors, but you do not need to show the suspense account in those cases. You just correct and put it on there. All right. So your trade payable account will look like this also. It was 125,000. So since it was undercast, all right, we're going to credit it. It was undercast by 25,000, so we'll credit it at 25,000. You see? Right. It was supposed the amount here was supposed to be 150,000, not 125. All right. The next, it tells us land was overstated by 30,000. All right. Land was overstated by 30,000. What type of account is land?
Before we go far, how have we gotten the 75,000?
When we try to make this trial balance here, okay, let's total them up here. Okay, on the debit side is 550,000. Here it's 475,000. So the credit side is lower. So you subtract 550 minus 475. That's how you get 75,000.
Okay.
Right. So the next one is telling us that land was overstated by 30,000. So I was saying, what type of account is land? This one here, what type of account is this? Eesh, we don't know what type of account land is. It's an asset. All right. To be specific, it's a fixed asset. All right. The double entry rules for assets is debit, increase, credit to decrease. Land is an asset. We've been told that it was overstated by 30,000. So it means we have to decrease the balance, right? Since it was overstated by 30,000. All right. So to decrease the balance on the land account, we have to credit land account, right? We have to credit so that we decrease. We've already been told how much the land has been overstated by, so we just know that we have to decrease. All right. So again, you debit your suspense account, 80,000, and you credit land 30,000. All right. So on your land T account, here it is land. We had the debit balance of 250,000. All right, we have to reduce it by 30,000 because it was overstated by 250,000. So we have to credit to decrease the amount. So 250,000 minus 30,000, 220,000. Right? Then on your suspense account, you debit 30,000. Are we okay with that? Any questions?
No, sir, Mr. Muhammad.
Yes.
I think I'm behind, a little bit behind.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we're dealing with errors that affect the trial balance, one-sided errors. All right. So in this question here, we've already been given the errors here. All right. The suspense account, the purpose here, all right, is to temporarily balance the trial balance. All right. So that we can correct the errors. Okay. This suspense account is just here to temporarily balance this trial balance until we fix these errors. Okay. So these errors here, you have to remember the journal entry, the double entry rules here. This table which I'm highlighting here, okay? Because these overstatements and understatements will rely heavily on the rules that apply to these accounts. Okay. So the first error that we had was that the trade payables account was understated by 12,000, 25,000, right? Meaning the amount we put on our trade payables account was low, all right? It was low. So what do we need to do? We need to increase the amount by 25,000. Are we okay with that, Mrs. Chulu?
Yes, sir.
Yes, the amount on our trade payables account was low. So what we need to do is to increase the amount. All right. So trade payables, it's a liability account. All right. This trade payables is the control accounts we've been doing previously, right? This represents the control account for payables, right? So a liability, we need to increase the amount. All right. So to increase the amount, we need to credit. All right. We need to credit trade payable so that we increase the amount. Okay. So the journal entry here, all right, you're going to credit the trade payables account. All right. Then the suspense account, its role here is to facilitate also the double entry. All right. So this when you credit the trade payables account 25,000, you have to debit the suspense account 25,000. Okay. So as you can see on your trade payables account here, We started with this low amount, 125. We had to increase it by 25,000. So that's how we got this 150,000. Are we okay with that, Mrs. Chu?
Yes, sir.
So have you seen also now on the suspense account, this debit entry here, we've put here 25,000. All right. The next error was that land was overstated by 30,000, meaning the price, the amount put on the land account was high by 30,000. So we need to reduce this amount. So you come to this table, land is an asset. So in order to reduce the amount, you need to credit, because a credit represents a decrease in an asset, right? A credit represents a decrease. So you are going to credit land 30,000, then you debit the suspense account 30,000. All right. So as you can see on our land account, here it's overstated by 250,000. So we need to reduce this 250,000. That's why we put a credit here. All right. If you debited, you're going to overstate it again, overstate by more. So then you do 250,000 minus 30,000, and that's how you get 220,000. Then finally, we've been told expenses were overstated by 25,000. All right. The expenses here were overstated by 25,000. All right. So what do we need to do? We need to reduce this amount by 25,000. All right. So expenses, if we go to the double entry rules, expenses, all right, debit increase, credit decrease. So in this case here, we have to reduce that amount by 25,000. So to reduce the amount, we're going to have to credit the expense account, 25,000. All right, we credit suspense account, 25,000, and we debit the suspense, 25, right? The suspense will be debited 25. This should be 20,000, not 25, because this should total up to 75 here. So it has to be 20,000. Yes, not 25, 20,000. So you debit the suspense account, 20,000, and you debit the expense account, 20,000. You reduce it by 20,000, right? But once you put this entry here, this 20,000, once you put that 20,000, as you can see, the suspense account must close. All right. This must close. 75,000, 75,000. All right. On your expenses account, it was how much? 300,000. 300,000. So you have to reduce it by 20,000. All right. 300,000 minus 20,000. to 80,000. All right. So you must close the suspense account and you put the new entries, and that's how you correct the errors. Any questions?
So what's the difference between that account where you were just highlighting that has the debit and the credit, and then the other single suspense account on top? What's the difference between the two?
What's the difference between which one?
There's the one that has the heading suspense account.
Uh-huh. This one
Then
here.
yes, then there's the one on the left that has debit and credit, suspense, trade payables, suspense, land. That one. What is that called?
What is you're talking about this here? This here.
Yes, please.
These are the journal entries to correct the errors.
So, say in an exam, what titles would you give those? I'm expecting that if you were given that question, you'd have to do all these key accounts plus the other ones. What headings would you give them?
What heading? Okay, I'm not really understanding your question. Are you saying what headings do I give these accounts here, these tier accounts, or what headings do I give to these which are in here?
Yes. Okay. So, like, for example, there's like a balance sheet as at this, that. So,
Oh, okay. You what you just have to do is after your journal entries, you just put the narrations. I don't think there'll be any need to title the journal entries because the journal entries you don't have to title them like a balance sheet or a income statement. You just write journal entries. Under your journal entries, you put your narrations. Yeah, there won't be any title that you have to put here. Okay, you just put your journal entries and your narrations. In your narrations, just say correcting the error of understatement or overstatement. Hope that answers.
okay.
Yes, there won't be any need for